Hi there, I'm Scott Lowe with ActualTech Media. I'm here today with Soam Vasani, who is a software engineer with Platform9. Soam, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So, what does a software engineer at Platform9 do?
So I joined Platform9 about a year ago. I'm working on Fission, an open source framework for serverless functions on Kubernetes.
What is serverless?
So I think serverless is the idea that a programmer brings just their source code, a function or a module or a set of those, associates the function with a trigger of some sort, an HTTP route or an event, and the framework takes care of the rest: deployment, scalability, operations, monitoring, logging, and so on. And really the idea of serverless is that the programmer doesn't have to worry about the servers, just the services that they're creating.
And what is Platform9 doing in this area of serverless computing?
So Platform9 has created Fission, an open source framework for serverless functions. And it works on top of Kubernetes. And because it's open source and works on Kubernetes, it can be deployed anywhere, be it AWS, Google Cloud, or your own on-prem data center, or even your laptop.
I've heard this word Lambda thrown about.
Yeah.
What is it?
So Lambda is the name of the AWS service that does serverless functions. AWS was the first in this space to create this framework. And the way we differ from AWS Lambda is in a few different ways. Most notably, we're open source, so that users can extend Fission to various languages, environments, and so on. They can look inside the source code and modify it the way they want. And also because we run on Kubernetes, we interoperate and coexist with other services that may not fit the serverless pattern. But we think that serverless and servers can coexist well on Kubernetes.
And what is the current status of Fission?
So Fission's pretty early stage. We open sourced in last November. So it's very early alpha. We're looking for early adopters and feedback, that sort of thing.
And what are some of the use cases that people think about around this technology?
Yeah, so for use cases, we divide them into a few categories. Serverless is great for building REST API backends, especially when they're pretty small. Today, it's hard to build more complex things, but for small REST APIs, it's great. It's a great way to build that. Another place where this is really useful, a more obvious immediate use case is around handling events, especially because Fission supports Kubernetes events. So you can wire up a Fission function to events that come out of Kubernetes itself. So if you deploy a new service, for example, on Kubernetes, you can have a Fission function that's triggered whenever a new service comes up, and you can glue this into your existing infrastructure in some way. So for example, if you're using AWS, you could create a DNS entry using their service, using a Fission function that's triggered when a new Kubernetes service is created. It's also great for creating webhooks. So webhooks are basically an integration point for hosted services like Slack or GitHub, for example. And Fission's a great place to implement a webhook. And in particular, a Slack webhook can be used to create chatbots. And we're doing this internally at Platform9. So we have these chatbots where anyone in Platform9 can ask the status of certain components of our infrastructure, or they can request certain parts of the infrastructure to start or stop test builds, for example, things like that.
And where can people go to learn more about Fission?
We have a website, fission.io, and that has links to our GitHub, and we have a Twitter and a Slack channel if you want to engage in a longer discussion.
That sounds great. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Okay.